Students, in today's tutorial, we're going to be having a look at the theory of knowledge essay. I'm going to be discussing some key improvements you may choose to implement before your final submission. By now, you may have written your draft and may have received or be receiving soon some feedback from your teacher. Hopefully, the points that I discussed today can help to support that feedback and give you some key ideas on how to refine your essay prior to submission. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce myself. I am a theory of knowledge teacher. I've been teaching the IB now for 7 years, and the feedback and points that I talk about in this tutorial are drawn from my own experience, as well as discussions with other teachers and the subject guide that the International Baccalaureate provides to teachers. These are the key points I'm going to be talking about in today's tutorial. They are some key tips and tricks in order to make sure that you don't repeat the same pitfalls and mistakes as prior submissions have done. We're going to be focusing on answering the driving question, effectively considering the implications of the argument, understanding the command terms, defining the key terms really clearly, how to construct an argument, selecting appropriate areas of knowledge and examples, developing claims and alternate claims, and making sure we don't avoid any of those jarring pitfalls, and then some general ideas on formatting. So to kick it off, okay, the driving question. You may have seen in your marking criteria that at the top of the marking criteria, it provides this question. Does the student provide a clear, coherent, critical exploration of the title? And when teachers and markers are having discussions about students' work, the key question that they're trying to answer is this. So before you get into the descriptors of the marking criteria, make sure that you can confidently say that you have done this in your essay. It must be clear and coherent to be awarded more than a 7. So if you're looking to get, a B or an A in theory of knowledge, you must make sure that you're being clear and coherent. I've given you a bit of a breakdown about what these key terms mean. So clarity, refers to the arguments provided, making sure that the examples are explained in a way that allows the reader to follow and understand the ideas that the candidate is making. Coherency refers to the examples and they're linked to the area of knowledge and prescribed title, making sure that you're weaving together pieces of analysis of example and your argument into a larger, overall consistent response that, may not answer the prescribed title, but definitely provides a discussion about aspects of the prescribed title. Your critical element, refers to how you are supporting your arguments by examples, making sure you're considering the implications of the arguments, and that you have awareness and evaluation of different perspectives. You may also, as a part of this, acknowledge some limitations of your arguments. So just to reinforce, when you are maybe considering peer marking or self-marking your essay, make sure before you go and have a look at the descriptors, have a look at this key question at the top of the marking criteria, because this is sometimes the determining element that may assist a marker in helping to award a particular grade. The implications of the argument. This is something that is really left off many essays because it is a feature of the highest assessment instrument. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about the 9 to 10 mark band. In order to receive a 9 to 10, you must have considered the implications of the argument. So if you're aiming for an A in theory of knowledge, then these are some things that are worth considering when writing your essay. These are some general ways that you can do that. There are many ways. This is by no means a definitive list. Overall, what you need to be thinking about when considering the implications of the argument is really, why have you written the essay? What is the overall point of discussing knowledge and considering different aspects of your claim? Why is this a worthwhile academic discussion? You could do that in a number of ways. You could identify that there's some further pathways for exploration or discussion, drawing some inferences from what you have discussed, maybe considering the likely results, other directions, your limitations, thinking about the validity and the representativeness of the examples, and maybe considering the perspective you define the terms and the consequence of alternate definitions. So realistically, in your essay, you should be having a really critical discussion and then coming to some resolution. thinking about your alternate claims, thinking about your claims, and coming to a resolution of what does this tell us about knowledge? Why have we engaged in this academic kind of thought process? What has been the point of it all? And if you've considered that and the overall implications of what this means for knowledge, then you would be showing elements of that highest mark band. The command terms are really imperative, and this ties in, with an understanding of the title itself. If you have a discuss or to what extent question, you can really consider them the same. Overall, what they're looking for is, a considered, a balanced evaluation, developing a range of arguments, and making sure that you're supporting those arguments with appropriate evidence and sound discussion. You do need to develop an answer. This could be in the form of a qualified argument. You should, come to, I suppose, some decision about knowledge, Whilst, you may have heard your teacher talk about, theory of knowledge as a discussion, and yes, that is important. Our discussion can be centered around, decisions or views that we have as well. Remember, this is a personal essay. You can use your personal pronouns in discussing, what you think about knowledge, and making sure that you have, use examples to support your view as well. So you do need to make sure that you do develop some sort of justified argument. Your key terms are really critical. You would have focused in your introduction probably defining these. It's important that you maintain these definitions throughout. If you alter or shift these, you're really changing the goalposts of the definition of your particular argument. If you have done debating in school, you always define the terms in the beginning, and they set the precedent for the discussion that you're going to have. If we change those, then we're really undermining our particular argument. In saying that, you need to make sure that your introduction does not become a list of key terms. It's not a glossary to begin the essay, and nothing is kind of less engaging than a student simply repeating either dictionary definitions from the internet, or simply defining every single term in the question. Normally, there tend to be 2 to 3 kind of key terms. Make sure you don't ignore parts of the title, and remember that you can come back to these definitions as you go through. So you might set up a definition initially, and then you kind of track it and come back to it, and maybe think about how your discussion, what impact the definition has on your discussion, and you can kind of use that as a part of one of your analysis kind of points. This is really important, and many students try to do this. They simply, when trying to define a term, look for a synonym and replace it, and then they use that synonym throughout their essay. I can think of previous titles which was focusing on things like replication, and students simply define it as repeating, and it's not repeating. The IB selects these words very, very carefully, and they really want you to engage with the nuance and the subtlety of these terms. So make sure that you're not simply just replacing it with an alternative word, and you haven't really considered what the word actually means. You may also, in order to provide some clarity to your argument, considering defining the term in the context of what you understand the title to mean and what it means for your argument. Remember that you can approach these titles in a number of different ways. There's no one correct way to do so. However, you can't necessarily bend the title to suit your own particular view. So be careful of not trying to manipulate it too much. Your argument, and this is, I suppose, a key element. I've had a few discussions, with teachers about this. In my view, I think an argument is really critical in developing a kind of critical answer, and it's a key part of your discussion. It also shows to the marker that you're considering a variety of viewpoints, because your thesis is going to be balanced. But most importantly, you need to make sure that you've really qualified your argument. So you said, if it's a to what extent question, you're kind of really indicating to the marker how much you agree or disagree, and you've done that very clearly. You may also identify what the claims or alternate claims kind of and kind of set up a roadmap for your essay. You may need to, depending on the title, develop a kind of conditional thesis. And, as I mentioned already with regards to key terms, make sure that you're thinking about the way in which different terms may be, differently applied with regards to various situations. And what we would encourage students to do, when you're considering the implications of your prescribed title, maybe consider, the extremes. So, for instance, in the November 2024 essay, there's this key term of ingenuity. Okay, what happens when there's no ingenuity, or if everything in our production of knowledge is ingenious? What are the kind of results that might develop? So it's really, when constructing your argument, you really need to make sure you have a really good understanding of your title. What you may find is that you might develop your claims and your alternate claims initially, and then you come back to your argument construction once you've kind of considered how you're going to approach the essay in the body. This is a kind of idea of how to develop a really good balanced thesis statement. So you need to pick 2 words from 2 different columns. So, for instance, I've given you the examples here. Is replicability necessary in the production of knowledge? And I've said that replicability is largely necessary. So I've picked a high modality word. Okay, you can see that I'm more strong on that side of the argument. Okay, arguing that yes, replicability is largely unnecessary. So I've gone for, that type of term because that's where my majority of my claims are going to be. I'm going to be arguing that it is largely unnecessary. However, I've picked then a medium modality word to discuss my alternate claims, saying that there are notable exceptions through which replication can assist. Okay, so I've then picked a medium word. Okay, so you need to pick, you can pick high-low, you can pick medium-low, you can pick, whichever combination of words that you think most clearly supports your particular claim and alternate claim. And you can see really clearly in that thesis statement, where my essay is heading. I've got a really clear, crystallized kind of view on how I view the title and how that relates to my claims. So you might want to pause this now or take a screenshot, and hopefully this can help you to develop your own really crystallized argument in relation to the title. Your areas of knowledge. These are critical because this is the tools you're going to be using and applying to your discussion of knowledge. Make sure you're only using the 5 listed in the guide. Okay, that is going to be mathematics, arts, history, natural science, and human science. Okay, you can't go outside or beyond those areas of knowledge. Okay, so for instance, if you're really keen on looking at the optional theme of knowledge and technology or knowledge and indigenous societies, okay, you need to think about how they're manifested within that area of knowledge. Okay, you shouldn't be referring to optional themes. You might be referring to some elements of knowledge within that, but it needs to be then linked to an area of knowledge. There's always many examples which are drawn from outside the area of knowledge. Okay, so for instance, a lot of students try to use news or legal cases, education, religion, politics. These may not necessarily be from academic disciplines and from area of knowledge. Most importantly, many students make the issue with history in referring to historical events and referring to contemporary events as well. Remember that history for historians is normally regarded as something that happened more than 10 years ago. And most importantly, when looking at history, historians do not provide a chronicle or a timeline of the past. Okay, that may have been the historical method a long time ago, but modern historical method is really focused on developing interpretations and evaluation of the past, not simply recounting them. So recounting events as examples to support your particular argument is not history, and so you haven't used history appropriately. You must make sure, if you are using history, you're considering the interpretations, the views, maybe the schools of thought that link to your particular argument. In addition to that, there are a number of different disciplines within the human sciences. You might use geography or economics. You may use political science. Be wary of using, just generic politics. Okay, you may refer to theology as, the study of religion, but may not necessarily just use religious studies. As always, whenever thinking about the area of knowledge, stick to subjects that you've done as a part of your international baccalaureate. If you have done global politics, then maybe political science as a part of the human sciences will be appropriate for you. If you haven't, then it may necessarily be, quite difficult in order to do so. So pick to your strongest subjects. You may find that you have more examples that you can be drawn from there. And we'll talk about that more when we come to examples. So, most importantly, with those examples, your essay shouldn't be simply a collection. You're not just gathering up examples and providing, seeing what sticks. You must make sure that prior to providing the example, you have some discussion of your claim or alternate claim. You need to make sure that you've explained knowledge and how it relates to your particular claim, and then provide the example to support that. You can use more than one, but if you are, have a think about, is this the best example? Is it representative? Is it maybe a marginal outlier? Why do I need to? If I need to, could I simply use maybe one stronger, better example? You may consider that 2 examples is really good because they can kind of corroborate off each other, support one another, reinforce each other. But just be aware, okay, that you have 1,600 words and you have quite a bit to discuss as a part of your essay. So really make sure that you're choosing the examples which are most significant. As already mentioned, you really want to be trying to find examples that are a prototypical representation of the area of knowledge, something that is general, kind of mainstream to the field. That is, is kind of critical, and it needs to be kind of a basis for generalization. As mentioned before, the best examples that students use are definitely drawn from their own studies. This is not required. However, why it is best and why it reads best is because it is clear and coherent. That is really important. If it's drawn from your own studies, chances are you probably fully understand the example, and therefore when you write it, you're writing it in a way that clearly demonstrates your particular point. So that's really critical. You need to ensure that you elaborate on the example, provide analysis, consideration of the implications of the example, linking back to my previous point, and it is most important that you provide clear connection between your point and the example. The marker is not trying to decipher your connection in your essay, so that needs to be really key. We're nearly done, guys. Moving on to the alternate claims. You may have heard your teacher refer to this as counterclaims. I don't really like the idea of a counterclaim because I think that it may develop simply kind of a flip-flopping argument where you say one thing and then you simply discount it, disregard it, and argue the opposite. So I like to think of claims in terms of maybe your key claim and then maybe your alternate claim. Your alternate claim, it can be counter, but when thinking about the implications of your argument, you need to be really clear about, how can you then coalesce these 2 opposing points and develop some sort of resolution. Your counter or your alternate claims could be based on maybe I would recommend a more nuanced view. So it could be in regards to the scope, the lens, the aspect, the groups, the nuances, okay, the context. And your alternate claim is really going to depend on your chosen prescribed title. So I would, dissuade you from simply saying one thing and making that your claim, and then in your counterclaim simply saying the opposite. I don't really think it shows that idea of that kind of critical thinking. And I think when you're considering the implications of your argument, you're going to have a really tough time of trying to come to some sort of resolution when you've said one thing and then said the completely opposite view. It also makes it really difficult to support your thesis statement because remember, we're using those modality words, those qualifiers, in order to clarify our particular argument. Your alternate or your counterclaim, it should be a way to entertain, establish a new point of view. Okay, you need to make sure that you are considering and have an awareness of an evaluation of different points of view. So I would again dissuade you from simply contradicting your particular argument. Alternate perspective does not necessarily contradict or rule out the validity of your original position, and does not have to be an opposite or extreme departure from the main argument. So it should be maybe an alternate or differing perspective. So some key pitfalls to avoid. Firstly, avoid rewording the prescribed title. The title is the title. Don't change it. Don't simply try to manipulate it for your own benefit or your own particular view. You need to respond to the title. You don't need to formulate your own knowledge questions. This was something in the old syllabus and previous essays. You no longer need to do it. You need to ensure that you address the full prescribed title. There may be 2 or 3 components as a part of that title. You need to make sure you address all of them. It's 1,600 words. Don't go over the word limit, because whilst you won't be subtracted marks, you may the marker may miss out on reading your a section of your body of work, maybe your conclusion, which may penalize you in terms of the overall marking. So make sure you stick to that 1,600 words. And lastly, some formatting. Make sure you anonymize your work. Make sure you have size 12 double-spaced font. The essay is not a research paper. Many students try to show their academic understanding by referring to lots of different sources. You can do this, but remember, you can simply draw the examples from your own experience, from your own study. You shouldn't need to go too much beyond what you've already learned in part of your 2-year international baccalaureate course. You have so much knowledge across all of your subjects. Use that before trying to then find these random examples from across the internet. If you do use sources, which if you can, many students choose to do so, make sure you use a consistent format. Make sure you reference them both in text, in a works cited list, or a bibliography. And lastly, if you do have any questions and you do need more support, this is my email address. As I said, I am a teacher. I'm happy to provide some general advice either to other educators out there, other TOK students, to help you to achieve the best result in TOK. All the best with your essays, and good luck in your final submission.